Have you ever noticed how your home can be spotless, organized, beautiful, exactly the way you always dreamed it would be, and still, the month never ends without that tight feeling? That question is uncomfortable because it exposes a truth almost no one likes to face. The appearance of control isn't the same as financial control, and that might feel normal, but it isn't. Maybe you're looking around right now, and everything seems to be in the right place. The furniture works together, the decor makes sense, the house projects stability. To anyone looking from the outside, and often even to yourself, everything looks under control. But as the days of the month go by, something starts to tighten. A subtle anxiety creeps in. The same mental math keeps repeating. A strange silence shows up when you think about the next bills. If that sounds familiar, stay with me. There's a very common, almost automatic belief that says, if my home is organized, my financial life must be too. As if the environment were a direct reflection of money health. But almost no one notices this. Visual organization can hide emotional disorganization, and this is where the game starts to change. Because the problem isn't a lack of effort or obvious irresponsibility. Many of these perfect homes belong to people who work hard, pay their bills on time, and do everything the way it's supposed to be done. And still, as the month moves forward, that feeling shows up, that something is slightly off. A quiet pressure that doesn't show in photos, doesn't make it into the feed, and doesn't match the image the home projects. What's most interesting is that this pressure rarely comes from one big financial mistake. It's born from small decisions, made with good intentions, justified as normal, reasonable, even deserved. A tweak here, a detail there, a choice driven more by emotional comfort than by financial reality. It feels harmless, but it isn't, and almost no one talks about it. In this context, the perfect home becomes a signal, a symbol, not just of comfort but of identity. It communicates something to others, but especially to you. It says you've made it, that you're on the right track, that everything is under control. But money doesn't respond to symbols. It responds to behavior, repeated decisions and invisible patterns most people are never taught to notice. Have you ever asked yourself why financial anxiety shows up precisely when everything seems to be going well? Why the pressure doesn't hit at the start, but in the middle or toward the end of the month? What you're about to discover might surprise you, because the answer isn't just about how much you earn or how much you spend. It's about why certain choices feel so obvious and so hard to question. And it's exactly at this point, when the house looks perfect and the month still refuses to close, that a discovery begins, one that completely changes how you see money, comfort, and security. A discovery many people avoid, but one that explains more than any spreadsheet ever could. And maybe the most unsettling part of all is realizing that this pressure doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within. It shows up in that quiet moment when you look around your home and feel pride, mixed with a discomfort that's hard to put into words. Because no one ever taught you that it's possible to build something beautiful on the outside, while on the inside, money is being managed more by feeling than by awareness. That isn't weakness, that's human. And that's exactly why almost no one talks about it openly. A lot of people living this reality believe they're alone, that they're the only ones who feel that subtle tightness as the month starts to run out. But the truth is, this is a silent pattern, shared by far more people than it seems. If you've been there, if any line so far gave you that knot in your stomach, or made you think, this is me, it might be worth letting that out. Sometimes, writing in the comments about what hit you the hardest isn't just venting, it's realizing that other people are going through the same thing, reading along, recognizing themselves, and feeling a bit of relief, knowing they're not alone. When someone likes a video like this, it isn't just an automatic click, it's a way of saying this conversation matters, that it needs to keep existing, that more people need to stumble into this content and start seeing what used to go unnoticed. And if this deeper way of looking at money, behavior, and choices resonates with your life, staying here, subscribing, following the next videos, is almost like making a commitment to yourself not to keep pretending everything is fine when, in reality, something doesn't add up. Because what comes next isn't about guilt or giving everything up or living in constant restriction. It's about understanding why certain decisions feel so natural, why the perfect home holds so much emotional power, and how that quietly shapes your financial life. And as we move forward, some beliefs begin to fall away while others, much more solid ones, start to take their place. That's when perception shifts, and once it does, nothing is ever seen the same way again. When a home reaches that level of perfection, something shifts, quietly. It stops being just a place to rest and starts functioning like a stage, a silent, well-lit stage, carefully set to support a narrative, not necessarily for people who visit in person, but for a diffuse, invisible audience that lives in our minds and on the screens we consume every day. That might sound exaggerated, but it isn't, and almost no one notices the exact moment when that shift happens. The perfect home, most of the time, isn't born out of practical necessity. It's born out of a symbolic need, a need to prove something, to confirm that you made it. Even if there isn't a specific person you're trying to convince, there's a constant sense of comparison, and that comparison no longer happens only with friends or family. It happens against images, against curated fragments, against edited lives that always seem organized, effortless, and figured out. That's when the financial life that exists only on Instagram starts leaking into real life. Spaces begin to be designed like sets. The right light for the photo, the angle that flatters, the detail that signals good taste. And alongside that comes a strategic silence about what doesn't fit the image. Bills, long-term, payments, postponed choices, sacrifices no one sees. It isn't an outright lie, it's aesthetic omission. And that omission has consequences, deep ones, on everyday financial decisions. Now I want to go even deeper into this because the problem isn't enjoying comfort or wanting a beautiful space. The problem starts when the home begins to support an identity that has to be maintained at any cost. From that point on, every decision stops being just financial and becomes emotional. Replacing a piece of furniture isn't just about the object, it's about protecting an image. Keeping a standard isn't just habit, it's the fear of dismantling the character that was created. And the most subtle part is that no one wakes up one day and consciously decides to live for appearances. It happens gradually. One choice here, another there. A just this once, an I deserve it. A everyone does it. These decisions feel small, isolated, even reasonable, but together they build an invisible structure that traps you. A home that impresses but charges a price. It demands attention, money, mental energy. It demands the continuation of a standard that cannot fail. That's why so many people feel like something doesn't quite fit. Because behind the impeccable home, there's a silent journey of tension, a hidden truth that rarely shows up in conversation, the feeling of constantly holding something up that isn't allowed to fall, and the more beautiful the stage, the greater the fear of showing what's behind the scenes. That's when the pressure grows, not fades. That's when money starts working against you, even when everything seems under control. If at any point you recognize this pattern, if this narrative touched something real in your life, leave a comment saying, "This makes sense to me." Because it's from that recognition that real change begins to take shape, and the way you see decisions, mindset, and financial impact starts to shift for good. Once that aesthetic settles in, the game quietly levels up, without warning. Because most people believe that major financial problems come from major expenses, an overpriced car, a poorly timed trip, an obvious debt. That sounds logical, but that's not where the real damage happens. The deepest impact happens away from the spotlight, in small decisions, repeated, emotionally justified, and rarely questioned. And that's exactly why they slip right past the spreadsheet without raising any red flags. The spreadsheet sees numbers. Instagram activates emotions. That sentence sums up more than it seems. The spreadsheet only records the final amount, but the decision was made long before that, in a place that never shows up in any column. It was made the moment you saw a reference, a similar home, a space that triggered desire, comparison, or that uncomfortable feeling of falling behind. The purchase doesn't start at the checkout. It starts in your head. One more piece of furniture, a nicer detail, a finish that's just a bit better. None of this feels serious on its own. Every choice comes with a polished justification. It's durable, it's an investment, it's quality of life, it's something you deserve after working so hard. And all of that may even be true. The problem is that these decisions aren't rare. They stack up, and when they do, they create a pattern that starts applying pressure, quietly. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because almost no one notices how repetition shapes mindset. This isn't about the object itself, but about the reflection it creates. Every new aesthetic decision reinforces an identity that has to be maintained. And the more solid that identity becomes, the less freedom you feel to step back. Not because anyone is forcing you, but because stepping back feels like losing something you've built about yourself. Renovations fall into this same cycle. Many times they don't come from real necessity, but from unconscious comparison. A reference that looks better, a space that feels more updated, a sense that your home is starting to look outdated. It doesn't show up as impulse, it shows up as progress. But that progress has a financial and emotional cost. It demands continuity, and continuity demands constant money to sustain a standard that never fully settles. That's when the tension grows, because the month feels tight, not due to one clear mistake, but because of a sequence of micro-decisions that seem harmless, yet together create real weight. Money starts disappearing not in big events but in everyday life, and when you try to understand why, you look at the spreadsheet and see nothing out of place. Everything looks reasonable, everything feels justifiable, and that's the most dangerous part of this hidden truth. When there's no clear villain, the pattern keeps repeating. You work more, try to get more organized, cut back here and there, but the pressure comes back, because what's draining you isn't the expense itself, it's the mental pattern behind the decisions. A silent journey of choices made more to sustain an internal image than to protect financial reality. If at any point you recognized yourself in these small decisions that never seemed like a problem, write in the comments. I'm on this journey too, because recognizing the pattern doesn't fix everything, but it changes where you're seeing your choices from. And when that shifts, the behind the scenes start to come into focus, setting the stage for a transformation that doesn't begin with money but with how decisions around it are made. Once the house is finally done, something curious happens. The cost doesn't go down, it changes form. Many people, often without realizing it, believe the financial effort ends when the last box is unpacked, when the furniture arrives, when the renovation is finished. But that's exactly when the most expensive phase begins. And almost no one talks about it because this part isn't pretty to show. It doesn't make for photos, it doesn't generate admiration, and it doesn't fit into a victory narrative, but it weighs on you, month after month, maintaining costs, and it costs more than buying. There are constant replacements, small repairs, adjustments made so the standard doesn't slip. There are products that have to match the image you created, consumption choices that need to align with the space, the aesthetic, the story that was built. A perfect home doesn't accept just anything. It demands consistency. And consistency in this context is money quietly flowing out. Now I want to go even deeper into this, and because this is where a crucial shift in perspective happens, spending stops being a conscious decision and becomes a silent obligation. You no longer buy just because you want to, but because you feel you have to keep something standing, a character, a version of yourself that this home represents. It's not just about buying, it's about sustaining the version of you that the home projects. And that creates a tension many people feel but can't quite name. From this point on, money starts working in service of image, not reality. You replace something simple with something up to standard, avoid cheaper options because they feel out of place, postpone important financial decisions to avoid disturbing the setting. None of this is done dramatically. It's done naturally, with that feeling that this is just how it is, that it's part of the deal. But that sense of normalcy is built over time, and it has a direct impact on your financial freedom. The most delicate part is that this invisible obligation doesn't show up as a mistake. It shows up as care, as maintaining what you've achieved. But slowly, it starts to close off space. The month feels shorter, choices become narrower, the margin of safety shrinks, and when something unexpected happens, the shock is greater, because everything was already committed to keeping the scene intact. At this stage of the journey, many people start wondering where the lightness went. They work, pay their bills, live in a beautiful home and still feel a constant fatigue around money, a weight that doesn't match the outward image. This is one of the most uncomfortable realizations in this process. The home that communicates stability may be demanding continuous effort just to keep from collapsing symbolically. And the longer this pattern lasts, the harder it feels to question it. Because questioning it isn't just about revisiting expenses. It's about revisiting past decisions, expectations that were created, silent promises made to yourself, It means looking behind the scenes, and almost everyone avoids the backstage because it doesn't have the same shine as the stage. If this sparked any recognition, write in the comments. This makes sense to me, because acknowledging this invisible cost doesn't end the conversation. It opens the door to real transformation, the kind that starts with mindset and gradually changes how you make decisions, understand impact, and redefine what truly sustains your life, on the inside and on the outside. Canadian English, natural, conversational, emotionally precise. There's a question almost no one has the courage to ask, because it can dismantle the entire scene in a matter of seconds. It's a simple, direct question, but deeply uncomfortable. If no one could see your home, no friends, no visitors, no Instagram, would it still make financial sense to you? Not as an ideal, not as a dream, but as a real choice, sustained by how you actually live, earn, and truly prioritize. That question changes everything because it removes the audience from the stage. It takes away the external gaze, the silent validation, the invisible applause. And when that's gone, what's left is just you, your decisions, and the hidden truth behind them. For many people, this is the first real shock, because what once felt obvious starts to blur. What felt like a choice begins to look like habit. What felt like comfort starts revealing an emotional cost that was never accounted for. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because this question isn't really about the house. It's about identity, about how much of your financial decision-making was shaped to sustain a version of you that needed to exist in someone else's eyes, even if that someone never asked for anything. The impact of this goes far beyond money. It cuts through mindset, influences your path, and defines the kind of freedom you believe you deserve. When comparison is removed from the equation, something interesting happens. Choices become clearer. Some lose all meaning. Others reveal they were never truly yours. And in that moment, a different kind of tension appears. Quieter, but far more powerful. The tension between continuing to uphold a comfortable narrative or facing the transformation that comes when you start deciding from the inside, not from the outside. This level of awareness doesn't arrive all at once. It begins with discomfort, with the feeling that something needs to be revisited, even if it's not yet clear what. It starts when you realize many decisions weren't made to improve your life, but to avoid a sense of inadequacy. And that realization changes how you see every expense, every act of maintenance, every seemingly small choice. The most delicate part is that there's no ready-made right answer to this question. It doesn't demand immediate action. It asks for honesty. It asks you to observe what's happening behind the scenes with more attention, to notice where genuine desire ends and automatic comparison begins. That's where money stops being just a resource and becomes a mirror that shows who is really making the decisions, you or the image you learn to maintain. If this question keeps echoing inside you, if it opened a reflection that doesn't yet have a clear shape, write in the comments, "This makes sense to me," because recognizing this point doesn't end the conversation. It marks an important step forward on a journey toward more conscious choices, where what guides your money is no longer the external gaze, but an identity that slowly begins to align with your own truth. If you stayed until here, it's because this conversation touched something real. It wasn't just about homes, money, or aesthetics. It was about decisions, mindset, and those quiet choices we make believing they're normal. Choices that, over time, end up shaping our entire lives. And by the time a conversation reaches this point, it stopped being superficial a while ago. If this message truly landed, leave something simple in the comments just to mark that you made it to the end. You can write, "This message was for me," not as an obligation but as a signal to yourself and to others that you're paying attention, reflecting, and willing to look more honestly at what's happening behind the scenes. Those comments create a safe space where other people recognize themselves and realize they're not alone on this journey. If you appreciate this kind of content, this deeper, more human reflection on money and choices, a like helps keep this conversation alive here. It's not about numbers. It's about signaling to the platform that this topic matters, that it deserves to keep reaching people who are living with this silent pressure and haven't yet found the words for it. And if you feel like continuing to deepen this perspective, subscribing to the channel is simply a way to keep walking through these conversations, without rush, without ready-made formulas, but with a little more clarity at each step. The goal here isn't quick answers, It's building understanding over time. There's a video right here that complements this topic perfectly, going even deeper into how identity and comparison quietly shape financial decisions without us realizing it. Click and continue with me there. The journey continues.